Do you believe that atheists can still more or less follow natural rights or law, a natural law? It's possible that certain arguments from natural law may be made. But because the human person is not being conceptualized as being in the image and likeness of God, that there will be some variant in there. I think, for example, some would speak of consciousness as the highest expression of life, and therefore, if there isn't consciousness, then you can kill it, whatever. This argument is made in abortion arguments all the time. Are they conscious? Consciousness, the ability to actively reason at any particular point in time. And so they would place a lot of value on that if another person has consciousness, you can't kill them because that's evil because of the consciousness. It's all about the consciousness. Some people will place a lot of argument on that, right? It's one way of viewing how they are understanding or arguing things. Sort of the similar example or analogy to that could be the fact that society or capitalism is favored towards people that have higher IQ, right, or a greater work ethic even, that people with higher IQ more often than lower make it in this kind of society, while the lower IQ people generally struggle and work for the people with higher IQs, which is a similar idea to genetics make man racist. Okay, so I mean, this is fair. Now, in the midst of looking at an economic system that favors ingenuity, hard work, and intelligence, that yes, genetic makeup is going to have an impact upon those things. But at the same time, we also have to not try to moralize. Like, let's say you have, a CEO of a company versus, I don't know, farming takes a fair bit of education and intelligence these days, but just basic manual labor. Well, someone's got to do the manual labor. And believe me, the more simple-minded folk are going to be a lot better at the manual labor on a day-to-day basis than somebody who feels like they're meant for more and they're just stuck in a menial job that's not very fulfilling for them. You actually need people who actually find joy in the simple things of life. You need people like that. And the thing is the whole idea of, well, it's better to be rich than poor, that's problematic as well. Some people are like, yeah, but they're rich. Yeah, but that probably makes them more unhappy than you are. It's probably a good thing that most of us don't get to do whatever we want whenever we want to do it, because it's probably going to lead to moral depravity. It's probably a good thing that we're actually staying busy at work doing something constructive than, having the chance to do whatever we want. It's probably better that way. So it's not. There's nothing wrong with someone having a lower IQ. There's nothing wrong with someone being poor. We need people who are both creative and strict. We need people who are hardworking and people who are more idealistic. We need all of it to work together. And whatever said that could be said against capitalism in this sense, it gives the opportunity for ingenuity. There are people who might not be book smart, but they have street smarts. They're a good salesman, and they could turn a dollar like anybody else. Or people being on time versus late is based on genes and not their fault or bias against them. I still struggle with the idea. that somehow I look at the Olympics. You have people from every gene pool, every country, participating in every sport, right? Despite the fact that some people or countries or gene pools might be more predominantly stronger with running or some other sort of thing. And here's the thing, a lot of it comes down to just resigning to nature. Just resign to nature. Okay, I'm not as smart. I'm not as strong. I'm not, you put me in any category, I'm not at the top of any of them. Some people are. I'm not. Am I somehow not valued? Well, once again, if you look from a strict evolutionary atheistic perspective, yeah, there is such thing. There is such a thing as a superior gene pool. But if you look in a more theistic perspective, where every person who is created in the image and likeness of God, now we're seeing that everybody has the exact same inherent dignity. We may have some variation between us and how we may function and live out our lives within this realm of contingency, but you can see how drastic, one naturally leads to a kind of Nazi philosophy, and the other is more leaning towards people being able to have a say, like more of a democratic constitutional republic, for instance, as opposed to like a strict dictatorship, a communist dictatorship or whatever, totalitarian regime of some sort. All because of one's anthropology. How do they conceptualize the human person? It has implications on all of that stuff. It really does, whether or not people are like looking at that stuff or not. It has implications for sure. Going back to capitalism, I believe, see. Kind of going off a bit here, but this kind of relates to how do you fault people for their actions? Having learned about mental health issues, I have trouble faulting anyone for almost everything they do wrong, because I just tell myself it's neither mental disease or simply their brains are constructed differently than mine. Just let things go. All right, well, along those lines, understanding that helps you become a compassionate person. It helps you understand the state in which a person grows up in. Yesterday I was talking a little bit about the movie Star Trek Nemesis, where a clone of Picard grows up on a Riemann moon of Romulus. And look at the kind of person he ended up becoming. Yes, the state and life in which we live does have some influences. In my childhood, when I was 10, my father put a bullet in his head. That messed up my adolescence. Okay. It's understandable why I rebelled against authority. It's understandable why I was responding out of trauma and my natural relational development as being a good citizen in society was arrested. It makes sense, but at the same time, yes, bad things happen to me. But at the same time, I also have to be held accountable for my own behavior, even if I got somehow predisposed to it in some way, or I was dealt a bad hand. That's just part of the reformation of my own self that society participates in. Yes, I may end up doing jail time, and yes, I may have to learn things the hard way, in my own journey towards human flourishing, but society still needs to uphold justice, which is right, because it is a good, because it's what is best for me. So for some people, the what is good for them might be to be imprisoned. That might actually be good for them. Maybe they need to be removed from free society as a whole, because by allowing it, it enables them to continue to violate the dignity of other human persons. And that's not good for them either. So it helps us better understand the situation in which they find themselves, and we can be compassionate towards them and help them. But it doesn't mean that we throw out everything else either, or that we just let it go. Let's see. Don said, going back to capitalism, I believe it's the best system. I have heard that it is the economic system that has drawn the most amount of people out of poverty. But I just see some of these arguments and see how some people may be at a disadvantage. Some people are. Some people are at a disadvantage. This is true. But compared to things like communism, it's 1,000,000 times better. Yeah, I would say that it can be misused by people, right? It can be misused by people where companies that are for profit can so emphasize profits that it undervalues labor, and it doesn't consider the value of their laborers as people, right? This is true, that this can actually happen. It can. And that's why, sometimes, people want to raise minimum wage, or why some people are in what do they call those? Unions. That's why some of these different things happen, because historically there has been cases where people have been abused. They haven't had the health insurance they needed, or or they're put in dangerous situations without liability to the company, without any responsibility at all. Yes, those things need to be rectified. There is such thing as legitimate social justice, right? Trudeau says, both of my parents grew up in communist countries. They can't believe kids these days. Yeah, I think it's because I think what's sold to them are ideas that may sound good on paper in some ways, in a vacuum, without other ideas being presented. They're shown how people can misuse capitalism, and then they're shown some of the benefits of getting social programs and help. It sounds like social justice with communism, or something like that, like free education or whatnot. And you can have social programs like Social Security, but still live in a capitalistic society and under a constitutional Republican governance without being full-on communist, right? But I think it's the argument that, well, real communism hasn't really been tried, right? Or real socialism hasn't been tried. And really, like, socialism is more of the philosophical, societal, economic precursor to a full-on communist government. Christians go to heaven, but socialists go to communism, right? That's the idea. I've yet to meet someone that grew up under a communist regime that actually promotes it. It's usually some naive college student. I agree. Don speaks to Trudeau saying, yeah, big thing now is democratic socialism. They hear democracy and then they think that's great. And for some reason, everybody today thinks democracy is inherently good, but the founding fathers made it clear that democracy has many flaws. Right. It's against the tyranny of the majority. Absolutely. That's key. I was just going to say that. And you literally said it in the next line. They wanted to guarantee rights, not democracy. Not a pure democracy. No. Not a pure democracy. We can vote for those who represent us. Which even then, that's kind of a strained thing. So let's say you were a representative of a district. And let's say you won your district 55%. How do you really represent just the 55% of that district? Like some people, some of the those in the seat of representatives will talk as if I am representing my district. Like, no, actually, you're only representing like 51% more of your district simply because you won by a very small margin or more. That's possible too. Let's not discount that. Because they're not really representing their district, not as a whole. Not of all the people who live there. Like, how could you do that? So it just swings, and then people can move, and there's freedom to do all of that sort of stuff.